The morning sun rose over New Haven Colony like it had for the past 70 years. Lisa Martinez stood on her office balcony watching the golden light spread across the green fields that stretched to the horizon. As colony administrator, she felt proud of what 50,000 humans had built on this world. 3 generations of families had turned empty land into farms that fed not just themselves but supplied food to 12 other human colonies across the sector. Lisa walked back inside her office and checked the daily reports on her desk. The harvest numbers looked good this year. Dr. Amy Foster had sent a note about her latest research project with the Kithara scientists. The insect-like aliens were helping humans develop better crop rotation methods. Lisa smiled as she read about the progress. This was what humanity had become after leaving behind the old violent ways of Earth. Down in the research center, Dr. Foster was already at work with her alien partners. The Kithara clicked and buzzed in their own language while pointing at plant samples under microscopes. Their hard shells gleamed under the lab lights as they moved with quick, precise motions. Amy had learned to understand their communication patterns after working with them for 5 years. The Nerians, who looked like walking dolphins with arms, were helping in the next room with water purification studies. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of his patrol ship Horizon. His crew of 12 people maintained security for the entire sector, but they rarely had anything serious to handle. The most exciting thing that happened last month was helping a merchant ship repair their engine. Jake sometimes wondered why Earth Defense Force even bothered keeping ships like his out here. The galaxy had been peaceful for almost 200 years. In the colony school, Kevin Chin raised his hand to answer a question about conflict resolution. The 10-year-old boy had learned about using words instead of fighting to solve problems. His sister Lucy sat next to him, drawing pictures of the different alien species that visited their world. Their teacher, Ms. Carol Murphy, smiled at how well the children got along with each other and with alien visitors. Commander Ron Blake sat in the small defense outpost on the edge of the colony. His job was supposed to be protecting New Haven, but the weapons in his facility had not been fired except for training in over 20 years. Ron often joked with his team that they were more like museum guards than soldiers. Sergeant Maria Santos laughed when Ron said this during their morning briefing. She had joined the defense force because her family expected it, but she spent most of her time helping with colony maintenance work. Mayor Helen Rogers met with the town council in the afternoon to discuss plans for expanding the colony. Chief Engineer Pete Williams presented designs for new residential areas that would house another 10,000 people. The waiting list to move to New Haven kept growing as more humans wanted to live the peaceful life the colony offered. Helen felt good knowing that her world represented the best of what humanity could be. The alien races in the galaxy saw humans as useful but weak. The Kithara appreciated human farming skills and patience in research work. The Nerians valued human diplomatic abilities when different species had disagreements. But most aliens thought humans had become soft after giving up their old warlike nature. They saw this as good because it made humans safe neighbors who would not threaten anyone. Dr. Carl Henderson taught history at the Colony University. His students learned about the bad old days when humans fought wars and hurt each other. Carl explained how humanity had evolved beyond violence and chosen a better path among the stars. The young people could hardly believe their ancestors had once been so primitive and cruel. They felt lucky to live in an age of peace and cooperation. Jenny Wright worked in the communications center, monitoring signals from other human colonies and alien worlds. The messages were usually about trade agreements, scientific discoveries, or cultural exchanges. Violence was so rare in the galaxy that when conflicts did happen, everyone called on humans to help negotiate peaceful solutions. In the colony gardens, families like the Hendersons and the Davis clan tended their plots of land. Children played between the rows of vegetables while their parents worked. Bob Stevens, who had moved to New Haven from Earth 10 years ago, often said this was paradise compared to the crowded cities he remembered. His wife Claire agreed as she watched their daughter play with alien children visiting from a Kithara trade ship. The evening brought families together for dinner and community gatherings. Paul Green, who worked as Dr. Foster's research assistant, joined his neighbors for a meal in the community center. They talked about their work, their children, and plans for tomorrow. No one spoke of weapons or warfare because such things seemed like ancient history that had no place in their modern world. As night fell over New Haven, Lisa Martinez made her final security check of the colony. Everything was quiet and safe. The defense sensors showed clear space in all directions. The alien research teams were settled in their guest quarters. The children were asleep in their beds, dreaming of the bright future they would help build. None of them knew that far out in space, ships with terrible intentions were moving toward their peaceful world. The Zephyrian fleet had been watching human colonies for months, studying their defenses and planning their attack. The crystalline aliens saw the humans as easy targets who had forgotten how to fight. They were about to learn how wrong they could be, but not in the way they expected. The Zephyrian battle fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of death and metal. Admiral Vexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the peaceful human colony spread out below him on the planet's surface. His crystalline body pulsed with satisfaction as he saw how unprepared these weak creatures were for what was coming. The human ships in orbit were small patrol vessels with barely any weapons. This would be easier than destroying a nest of insects. Vexthara had studied human behavior for years through spy networks and captured data. The reports all said the same thing. Humans had become soft farmers and diplomats who had forgotten how to fight. Their colonies had no real defenses, and their people lived like children playing in gardens. The Admiral's orders were simple: destroy everything and claim the valuable worlds for the Zephyrian Empire. The first plasma cannons fired without warning. Bright blue energy beams lanced down from orbit and struck the colony's main power station. The explosion could be seen from space as the building vanished in a ball of fire. Emergency alarms began screaming across New Haven as the lights went out. In half the settlements, Lisa Martinez was in her office when the attack began. The building shook as explosions rocked the colony center. She grabbed her emergency communicator and tried to contact the defense outpost but got only static. Through her window she could see fires spreading across the research district where Dr. Foster worked. Lisa's hands shook as she activated the colony-wide emergency broadcast system. Captain Jake Morrison watched in horror from his patrol ship as the Zephyrian fleet unleashed destruction on the world below. His small vessel carried only defensive shields and light weapons meant for pirates or accidents. Against a full battle fleet he was helpless. Jake ordered his communications officer to send a distress signal to Earth Defense Force while he tried to think of some way to help the people. Dying on the surface, the Zephyrian ships continued their bombardment with methodical precision. Quantum torpedoes struck the agricultural centers, turning vast fields of crops into burning wasteland. The aliens had studied human colony layouts and knew exactly where to aim for maximum damage. They targeted power plants, communication centers, and transportation hubs first to prevent any organized resistance. Dr. Amy Foster was working in her lab when the ceiling collapsed. Burning debris trapped her leg as smoke filled the room. The Kithara scientists she had been working with were crushed under fallen equipment. Amy could hear screams from other parts of the building as people tried to escape the destruction. She managed to pull herself free and crawled toward the emergency exit, leaving behind years of peaceful research that was now just rubble and fire. Commander Ron Blake's defense outpost took a direct hit from orbit. The small facility was not built to withstand military assault and crumbled like paper under the alien weapons. Blake and 3 of his people survived by diving into the underground bunker just before the building exploded above them. When they emerged, they found their equipment destroyed and their communications dead. In the colony school, Miss Carol Murphy tried to keep the children calm as explosions shook the building. Kevin Sheen held his sister Lucy's hand while other students cried in fear. The teacher led them toward the emergency shelters that had been built for natural disasters, not military attacks. They could hear the roar of alien ships overhead and see the orange glow of fires through the windows. Mayor Helen Rogers coordinated the evacuation efforts from the emergency command center deep underground. Reports came in from across the colony of buildings destroyed and people trapped in the rubble. The medical centers were overwhelmed with injured civilians. Chief Engineer Pete Williams worked frantically to keep the power running to the underground shelters where thousands of people were hiding. The Zephyrian ground assault began 2 hours after the orbital bombardment started. Crystalline warriors in powered armor dropped from transport ships to hunt down survivors. General Krextal led the ground forces with orders to eliminate every human on the planet. The aliens moved through the burning colony like predators. Using advanced sensors to detect life signs in the ruins, Paul Green had been helping Dr. Foster's team evacuate research data when the lab was hit. He found Amy trapped under debris and helped her reach the emergency tunnels. Behind them, years of scientific cooperation between humans and aliens burned in the wreckage. Paul wondered if any of their alien friends had survived or if they had all died for the crime of working with humans. Sandra Bell organized civilian groups in the underground shelter network. The emergency supplies were meant to last a few days during natural disasters, not extended military occupation. She counted less than 3,000 survivors out of the 50,000 people who had lived in the colony that morning. Families were separated and many children had lost their parents in the attack. The Zephyrian ships in orbit fired deep penetration weapons designed to collapse underground shelters. The aliens had studied human emergency procedures and knew where people would try to hide. Explosions rocked the tunnel systems as bunker-busting bombs sought out the survivors. Many of the emergency shelters became tombs as their entrances caved. Jenny Wright managed to send one final message to Earth before the communications center was destroyed. Her transmission carried the terrifying news that New Haven was under attack and being systematically destroyed. She died at her post when the building collapsed, but her message reached other human colonies and eventually Earth itself. By evening, New Haven was a smoking ruin. The beautiful farms were burned fields. The research centers were craters. The homes where families had lived in peace were piles of rubble. The Zephyrian forces began landing construction equipment to start terraforming the planet for their own use. They expected to find only scattered survivors hiding in caves. Admiral Vextara reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. Human resistance had been exactly as weak as predicted. A few patrol ships had tried to fight but were easily destroyed. The ground forces reported minimal opposition from the colony's pathetic defense units. The admiral prepared to move his fleet to the next human target, confident that the conquest would be just as easy. The survivors huddled in natural cave systems that the alien sensors could not penetrate. Lisa Martinez had died protecting a group of children during the evacuation. Dr. Foster lay injured in the darkness, mourning her alien colleagues and her destroyed research. Commander Blake counted his remaining people and wondered how long they could hide before the Zephyrians found them. None of the aliens realized they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The caves beneath New Haven's mountains had never felt so cold and dark. 3,000 survivors huddled in the natural chambers that carved deep into the planet's bedrock. These tunnels had been explored by colonists as a hobby, never thinking they would become the last refuge for their people. Now families pressed together in the darkness, listening to the distant rumble of Zephyrian machines reshaping their world above. Commander Ron Blake moved carefully through the cave system, checking on the scattered groups of survivors. His military training, rusty from years of peaceful duty, slowly came back to him as he organized the people into manageable units. Sergeant Maria Santos helped him establish communication between the different cave sections using salvaged equipment and makeshift signal relays. In one of the deeper chambers, Kevin Chian sat with his sister Lucy and a dozen other children whose parents had died in the attack. The 10-year-old boy had stopped crying and now watched everything with intense focus. He studied the cave layouts that adults were drawing and asked questions about Zephyrian patrol patterns that surprised the grown-ups with their tactical insight. Dr. Carl Henderson had never expected his historical knowledge to become useful. Survival information. The university professor gathered survivors around him and began sharing stories about how humans had once fought and survived in impossible situations. He talked about guerrilla warfare, resource management during sieges, and the psychological tactics that ancient human warriors had used against superior enemies. Lucy Shun, barely 8 years old, drew detailed maps of the cave system from memory. After exploring with other children, her drawings showed passages that adults had missed, and potential escape routes that could be useful if the Zephyrians found their hiding place. She worked with quiet concentration that seemed unusual for her. Such a young child, Amy Foster lay on a makeshift bed, her injured leg slowly healing without proper medical equipment. The xenobiologist had lost her life's work and many alien friends in the attack, but something new was growing in her mind. She found herself analyzing Zephyrian behavior patterns and weaknesses with a cold analytical approach that felt both foreign and familiar. Communications specialist Jenny Wright had survived the destruction of her workplace and now used jury-rigged equipment to monitor Zephyrian communications. She discovered that she could understand basic patterns in their crystalline language after just days of listening. Her mind seemed to naturally grasp the alien communication structure in ways that surprised her. The survivors began changing in subtle ways that none of them fully understood. Carol Murphy, who had been a gentle schoolteacher, started making weapons from cave minerals and scavenged metal. Her hands moved with confident skill as she shaped improvised knives and clubs. The peaceful woman who had taught children about nonviolence now planned ambush tactics against alien patrols. Bob Stevens and his wife Claire organized foraging teams to gather supplies from the ruined colony. The former city worker moved through the dangerous terrain with natural stealth, avoiding Zephyrian sensors and patrols. He taught other survivors how to move silently, hide their tracks, and strike quickly at isolated targets before disappearing back into the caves. Paul Green had become the group's primary scout, using his knowledge of the research facility layouts to map Zephyrian positions and activities. He discovered that the aliens were systematically stripping useful materials from the colony while building their own structures. The information he gathered was detailed and tactically valuable in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. The children adapted to their new reality faster than the adults expected. They played games that looked like fun but were actually training exercises in stealth, observation, and small unit tactics. Kevin Cheon organized teams of young people to gather intelligence on alien movements, and their reports were more accurate and useful than those from many adults. Commander Blake realized that something fundamental was happening to the survivors. People who had never held weapons in their lives were instinctively understanding combat principles. Farmers and teachers were thinking like soldiers. Children were grasping tactical concepts that should have taken years to learn. It was as if some deep genetic memory was awakening under the pressure of survival. Dr. Henderson shared stories from human history that resonated with the survivors in unexpected ways. Tales of resistance fighters, guerrilla campaigns, and desperate last stands against impossible odds felt familiar rather than foreign. The peaceful colonists began to understand that their ancestors had faced similar challenges and found ways to win against superior enemies. The survivors established contact with other hidden groups across the planet. Small bands of humans had managed to escape the initial attack and were hiding in forests, abandoned mines, and natural shelters. The communication network that developed between these groups showed organizational skills that surprised everyone involved. Sergeant Santos led the first successful attack against a Zephyrian patrol, using improvised explosives and coordinated ambush tactics. 12 survivors destroyed an alien scouting unit and captured their equipment. The victory felt natural and satisfying in ways that disturbed the peaceful colonists even as it gave them hope. Jenny Wright decoded Zephyrian messages revealing that similar attacks had destroyed 3 other human colonies in the sector. Riverside, New Terra, and Haven's End had all fallen to the alien fleet. Nearly 200,000 human civilians were dead, and the Zephyrians were planning to expand their campaign to strike at Earth itself. The news of additional colony destruction triggered something deeper in the survivors' minds. The peaceful facade that had defined human society for 2 centuries began cracking under the pressure of species survival. People who had never thought about violence were now planning complex military operations with intuitive understanding. Amy Foster worked with salvaged alien technology, reverse engineering Zephyrian equipment with skills she did not remember. Learning, her injured leg no longer slowed her down as she moved through the caves with predatory grace. The gentle scientist was becoming something harder and more dangerous. As the days passed, the survivors organized into an effective resistance movement. They established supply caches, communication networks, and coordinated strike teams. The transformation from peaceful colonists to guerrilla fighters happened so naturally that many did not realize how dramatically they had changed. Kevin Chun stood before a group of adult survivors and presented a detailed analysis of Zephyrian weaknesses and tactical recommendations for future attacks. The 10-year-old spoke with authority and insight that made veteran colonists listen carefully to his words. His sister Lucy had become the group's best intelligence gatherer, moving through alien-controlled areas with ghost-like stealth. Commander Blake looked at his people and saw something that both inspired and troubled him. The humans hiding in these caves were no longer the peaceful farmers and researchers who had lived in New Haven. They were becoming something older and more dangerous, something that the galaxy had forgotten could exist. The Zephyrians had awakened, a sleeping predator, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The emergency session of the Human Colonial Council convened 12 hours after Captain Morrison's final transmission reached Earth. President Margaret Stone sat at the head of the table while Defense Minister Chris Parker presented the devastating news. 4 human colonies destroyed, 200,000 civilians dead, and a hostile alien fleet moving toward the heart of human space. The council members stared at reports they could barely believe. For 2 centuries, humanity had enjoyed peace with their galactic neighbors. The idea that an alien species would commit genocide against peaceful human settlements seemed impossible. Yet the evidence was undeniable, broadcast across all human worlds through emergency channels. Admiral Susan Taylor entered the council chamber with documents that had not seen daylight for generations. Her family had served in Earth's military forces since before humans reached the stars, maintaining traditions and knowledge that most people had forgotten. She placed classified files on the table with hands that trembled slightly with anticipation rather than fear, deep beneath Earth's surface, in facilities so secret that even most government officials did not know they existed. Ancient systems began powering up for the first time in 200 years. General Frank Morrison, Captain Jake's grandfather, stood in a command center that looked like something from humanity's warlike past. Banks of monitors showed weapons production facilities, hidden shipyards, and military installations that had been waiting in cold storage. The Guardian Network had operated in shadows for centuries. Descendants of military families who refused to believe that human nature had truly changed. They had maintained the old knowledge, preserved the dangerous technologies, and kept the industrial capacity for total war hidden from a peaceful society that would have been horrified by their existence. Dr. Rachel Kim worked frantically in her genetics laboratory, analyzing blood samples from the New Haven survivors that had been transmitted through quantum channels before the colony fell. Her findings challenged everything that scientists believed about human evolution. The peaceful nature that humanity had cultivated was not genetic change, but cultural conditioning that could be reversed under extreme stress across human space. The news of the colony attacks spread like wildfire. On worlds where families had lived in peace for generations, something ancient stirred in the collective consciousness. Citizens who had never considered military service flooded recruitment centers. Industrial facilities that had produced farm equipment and medical supplies began converting to weapons manufacturing without being ordered to do so. Don Roberts, a construction engineer on the colony world of New Boston, found himself designing military fortifications with knowledge he did not remember learning. His blueprints showed defensive positions, weapon emplacements, and strategic strong points that would have impressed professional military architects. When asked where these ideas came from, he could only say they felt natural and right. Nina Bell worked as a civilian architect, but discovered she had an intuitive understanding of military engineering. Her peaceful designs for schools and hospitals transformed into plans for armored command centers and hardened bunkers. She collaborated with other civilians who seemed to possess similar buried knowledge of warfare and defense. The human manufacturing base revealed capabilities that shocked even government officials. Automated factories designed for peaceful production proved easily adaptable to military hardware. Production rates exceeded all projections, as if the entire industrial system had been unconsciously prepared for this moment. Workers operated complex weapons production equipment with skills they should not have possessed on colony worlds throughout human territory. Volunteers demonstrated natural abilities that defied explanation. Simple farmers like Bob Stevens, who had escaped New Haven, showed remarkable aptitude for small unit tactics and guerrilla warfare. Nurses like Claire Adams instinctively understood battlefield medicine and combat trauma treatment. Teachers organized their students into effective intelligence networks, the Zephyrian. High Command received reports of human military mobilization but dismissed them as panic responses from a weak species. Admiral Vexthara prepared his fleet for the final assault on Earth, confident that human resistance would collapse as easily as the colony defenses had crumbled. The crystalline aliens could not conceive that their easy victories had awakened something terrible. In the hidden shipyards scattered throughout the Sol system, vessels emerged from construction bays that dwarfed anything in the current human fleet. The League ship, designated Retribution, carried weapon systems that had been theoretical concepts for 2 centuries. Its crew discovered that operating advanced military hardware felt as natural as breathing. Despite having no formal training, Admiral Taylor took command of the war fleet with authority that surprised even her. Military protocols that should have taken years to learn came to her instinctively. Her officers, drawn from civilian populations across human space, demonstrated tactical thinking and strategic planning abilities that exceeded their training and experience. The transformation of human society happened with frightening speed. Civilians who had protested against violence now demanded weapons to defend their families. Children played war games with disturbing accuracy and tactical sophistication. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to develop more effective means of destroying enemy forces. President Stone addressed the Human Colonial Council with words that would have been unthinkable months earlier. She spoke of total war, species survival, and the necessity of showing the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of when threatened with extinction. The peaceful leader had become something harder and more dangerous. Dr. Henderson Broadcasting, from the caves of New Haven, shared historical knowledge that resonated across human space. Stories of ancient human warfare, tactical innovations, and the capacity for coordinated violence that had once allowed humans to conquer their hostile homeworld. The peaceful colonists realized they were descendants of the most successful predator species their planet had ever produced. The Guardian Network revealed itself to the human government, bringing forward technologies and strategies that had been preserved in secret for centuries. Weapons designs, military doctrines, and industrial capacity for sustained warfare that made the current crisis manageable rather than hopeless. Humanity had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Jenny Wright, working with salvaged equipment in the New Haven caves, intercepted Zephyrian communications revealing their invasion timeline. The alien fleet was moving toward Earth, expecting to find the same weak resistance they had encountered at the colonies. The crystalline warriors were about to learn that genocide against humans carried consequences they had not considered. Young Kevin Chen, now recognized as a tactical prodigy despite his age, worked with adult resistance fighters to coordinate planet-wide guerrilla operations. His sister Lucy had become the most effective scout and intelligence gatherer on New Haven, moving through Zephyrian-controlled territory with skills that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old child. The survivors in the New Haven caves prepared for their role in the coming battle. They were no longer hiding victims but advanced scouts for a human military machine that was revealing capabilities the galaxy had never suspected. The peaceful farmers and researchers had become something their alien neighbors would not recognize as Admiral Taylor's fleet moved toward the New Haven system. The Zephyrian forces prepared for what they expected to be their final easy victory before conquering Earth itself. They had no idea that their attack on peaceful human colonies had awakened a sleeping predator species whose true nature was about to reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Susan Taylor stood on the bridge of the Retribution as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system. 24 hours had passed since the human war fleet launched from Sol, but for the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was returning to wage total war. The massive vessels that emerged from the space-time distortion were unlike anything the peaceful human colonies had ever built. The Zephyrian fleet was spread across New Haven's orbital space, strip mining the destroyed colony and building forward bases for their planned assault on Earth. Admiral Vextara received sensor readings of the approaching human ships but dismissed them as another weak patrol force. His intelligence reports insisted that humans had no military capacity worth considering. Captain Lisa Walker commanded the destroyer Vengeance, one of 12 warships that had been constructed in the hidden shipyards during humanity's peaceful centuries. Her crew operated weapon systems with instinctive skill that defied their civilian backgrounds. The tactical displays showed Zephyrian positions with clarity that suggested perfect understanding of enemy weaknesses. The first human attack came without warning or diplomatic communication. Taylor had decided that species which committed genocide against peaceful colonies deserved no courtesy or mercy. Retribution's main guns fired quantum disruptor beams that cut through Zephyrian shields like paper. 3 enemy battleships exploded in the opening salvo. Before their crews understood they were under attack, on the planet's surface, Commander Blake's resistance network received coded signals from the human fleet. The survivors who had hidden in caves for weeks suddenly emerged as coordinated ground forces, moving against Zephyrian positions with tactical precision that stunned the alien occupiers. Kevin Chen, despite being only 10 years old, commanded a strike team that destroyed a major enemy communications facility. The Zephyrian response was immediate but ineffective. Their crystalline warriors had conquered dozens of species through superior technology and brute force tactics. Against the human fleet, these advantages disappeared as if they had never existed. Human ships moved with coordination that suggested perfect battlefield awareness. Anticipating enemy actions before they occurred, General Krextel tried to organize his ground forces but found himself fighting an enemy that no longer resembled the peaceful farmers his troops had massacred. The surviving colonists fought with weapons improvised from alien technology and tactics that seemed to come from genetic memory. His patrols disappeared into carefully planned ambush while human civilians moved through his defensive positions. Like ghosts, Dr. Amy Foster led a team of survivors in capturing a Zephyrian command post using techniques that combined her scientific knowledge with tactical skills she did not remember learning. The gentle xenobiologist had become a predator who understood alien psychology well enough to predict their responses and exploit their weaknesses. Her injured leg no longer slowed her down as she moved with deadly purpose. The space battle revealed capabilities that shocked even the human crews. Weapon systems that had been designed as theoretical concepts proved devastatingly effective against Zephyrian technology. The alien ships that had seemed invincible while attacking defenseless colonies were revealed as inferior designs when, facing opponents who understood warfare, Admiral Vextara watched his fleet crumble under human assault and felt something approaching terror for the first time in his military career. The species he had dismissed as weak farmers was systematically destroying forces that had conquered half the galaxy. His urgent requests for reinforcements received no response because the human attack had severed all communication with the Zephyrian Empire. Captain Walker's destroyer penetrated deep into enemy formation using tactics that combined conventional space warfare with innovations that seemed to spring from nowhere. Her weapons officer, a former agricultural engineer named Don Roberts, operated targeting systems with accuracy that exceeded computer predictions. The civilian crew fought with coordination that professional military units rarely achieved. The turning point came when human ground forces coordinated with the orbital fleet to eliminate Zephyrian command centers simultaneously. Survivors like Pol Green and Sandra Bell led precision strikes that crippled alien communications while Admiral Taylor's ships destroyed their space-based support. The enemy forces found themselves isolated and facing opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. Jenny Wright, working from the caves with equipment salvaged from the destroyed colony, managed to hack into Zephyrian tactical networks and broadcast false orders that sent alien units into carefully prepared human ambushes. Her technical skills, enhanced by weeks of studying enemy systems, allowed her to turn their own technology against them with devastating effectiveness. The final assault on the Zephyrian flagship came from multiple directions as human forces demonstrated tactical flexibility that defied the aliens' understanding of warfare. Lucy Chun, barely 8 years old, provided intelligence that allowed Commander Blake to position his people perfectly while Captain Walker's ships attacked from above. The combined operation showed coordination that seemed impossible without years of joint training. Admiral Vexthara died when his flagship exploded under concentrated human fire. His final transmission to the Zephyrian High Command warned of human capabilities that contradicted every intelligence report his species had compiled. The peaceful farmers had revealed themselves as the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. The battle ended with complete human victory and the total destruction of the Zephyrian invasion fleet. Not a single alien vessel escaped to carry word of what they had encountered. The mining operation that had been stripping New Haven was reduced to floating debris while human ships established orbital control with methodical efficiency. President Margaret Stone's address to the Galactic Council was broadcast across known space within hours of the victory. Standing beside Admiral Taylor and young Kevin Chun, who had become a symbol of humanity's hidden nature, she delivered words that would reshape interstellar politics forever. Humanity had chosen peace for 2 centuries, but when faced with genocide, their true nature emerged. The alien species monitoring the broadcast saw a transformation they could barely comprehend. The diplomatic farmers who had mediated their disputes for generations were revealed as descendants of history's most successful predator species. The humans had not evolved beyond violence, but had simply chosen to restrain capabilities that could destroy civilizations. Dr. Rachel Kim's genetic research, now declassified and shared with the scientific community, proved that human peaceful behavior was cultural conditioning rather than evolutionary change. Under extreme stress, humans reverted to psychological and physiological patterns that had allowed their ancestors to conquer Earth's hostile environment and survive against impossible odds. The Guardian Network, no longer operating in secret, revealed the true scope of human military preparation. Hidden shipyards, weapons development programs, and industrial capacity for sustained warfare that dwarfed anything other species possessed. Humanity had unconsciously maintained the ability to wage total war while building their peaceful civilization. The surviving Zephyrians who received reports of the fleet's destruction faced a choice between extinction and surrender. Their empire, built on conquering weaker species, crumbled when confronted with opponents who fought back effectively. The crystalline aliens sued for peace within days of learning what had happened at New Haven. The galaxy watched in shocked silence as human shipyards across space began operating at full capacity. The peaceful colonies that had seemed defenseless were revealed as forward bases of a species whose military potential exceeded anything in recorded history. The predators had removed their mask of civilization and shown their true face to the stars. The other alien species began reassessing everything they thought they knew about their human neighbors. The Kithara and Nerians, who had worked peacefully with human scientists, realized they had been collaborating with a species that could have conquered them at any time. The galaxy's political balance shifted as everyone understood that humanity's restraint was a choice, not weakness, and that choice could be revoked if they were sufficiently provoked.